Hi, welcome to Chad Silversmithing. Today I'm going to do a piece based off of a stone that my friend gave me yesterday. I had my friend John, who's a lapidary. He and I shared a booth at an art show over the weekend, and he gave me a couple of stones, and he cuts very pretty stones, and I'm really excited about both of them. So, and they got a cool shape. I picked out one of the two, and I'm going to make a pendant out of it today. It's made out of Natrolite, which I've never actually set a piece of Natrolite before. It kind of has almost like cells in it that are just really interesting looking. The closest thing it looks like to me is maybe fossilized coral. The colors in it has some whites and pinks, and so I chose as an accent stone to put on a bale a pretty intense bright red 6 millimeter garnet cabochon. I think it'll accent it well. And I'm going to do some shape repetition kind of to place the main focus on the stone rather than the design itself, because it's just such an interesting stone. So sometimes you want to really get people to focus on the stone, and other times you want to use the stone kind of to accent what you're doing with the metal. So it just kind of depends on what you're doing. So we'll give it a try and see how it turns out. I have a couple of groups of people I wanted to thank today. My patrons over on Patreon are my core group of supporters, and I truly value their support. They are not only providing me with financial support, they've created this really nice environment over there that we can all kind of share ideas and teach each other what we know and help each other out. It's a nice place. I have a new one over there, Nancy E. Thank you for signing up. I look forward to getting to know you over there, and I hope that you have the same experience I've had, which is that it's a great group of people. So, the other group I wanted to thank was my YouTube subscribers. We just passed 22,500, I think. I'll double check and put it in the actual description of the video, but that's amazing. I never ever thought I'd have that many people following my channel. Thank you for that. Thank you for the nice comments. And thank you for the super thanks and the buy me a coffees and buying my merch and my ebooks. All of that stuff really makes a big difference in my financial situation. So thank you for that. I do appreciate that. Okay, with those things being said, let's get started on this project. This is one of my design idea sketchbooks that you can get over on my merch store. The more recent ones have some useful charts on the back. This particular one has a gauge to inches to millimeters chart, which I use all the time. And I gradually fill these up as I've been doing the channel. I think I filled up 4 or 5 of them. I found them to be a great way to keep track of your projects. And for me, because I'm not super good at two-dimensional drawing kind of things, having this little dot matrix in the background really helps me to kind of keep things more symmetrical. So this is what I have in mind today. I'll show you the piece of stone. This is Natrolite, and I've never seen it before. It kind of reminds me a little bit like Larimar because of the different patches and different shades of colors. Kind of reminds me of fossil coral because of the individual cell kind of segments. But I think it's interesting and pretty and kind of is intriguing. This particular way that John cut this kind of looks like a shark's tooth or something to me. But I thought, you know, let's use that shape because it's interesting to kind of create the pendant. So I'm not going to do much around the stone, but above it I'm going to put kind of a tapered piece of square wire. I'll probably flatten it a little bit on this side to make it wider. And then I'll put some 14 gauge square wire connecting that to the bezel that we're going to build around this. And then we'll put a little ring on top. And I'm going to make a sandwich bale to put the little garnet that I picked out. And I'll probably do all of it in front of you except for the bale. If you want to see how to make one of these kind of sandwich bales, I'll put a link right there for you. It's kind of a nice looking bale sort. It's basically just 2 slices of sheet with spacers in between, and you can run a chain through it and you can run a ring through it. And you can put a divider in the middle if you want to, but you don't have to. So I made a bezel for this already. But it's a cute little like 6 millimeter garnet. Really kind of nice color. I like garnets. There's a lot of different kinds of garnets. What I've always wanted is some spessartite garnet, which is kind of sort of an orangey color, but I've never actually bought any of those, I don't think. They're kind of expensive last I looked. I like savorites, which are green, and there's a lot of different shades of red. So, but this is a, what is this? Almandine, I think, if I remember right. Correct me if I'm wrong. So for the bezel, we're going to use 26 gauge fine silver bezel, which is 0.41 millimeters, and it's 3/16 of an inch tall. This particular piece I already filed down a little bit, so it's not near as tall because I don't need it to be that tall. 3/16 inch tall for those of you overseas is 4.76 millimeters. Or those of you in the United States who have converted to the metric system. My second grade teacher told me we were converting to the metric system over here and was teaching us all about it. And of course that never really happened because change is hard. Okay, so I'm going to set that to the side, and like I said, I'll do the bail off camera. But let's make a bezel for this to start with. So I think when you're doing something with sharp corners like this, you don't want to end the bezel right there because it's going to cause problems when you go to set the stone. So we're going to get the end filed flat here, and we'll start it in one of these longer sides. We had a really nice show this past weekend. I did reasonably well, and the weather was nice, people were nice. I got to meet one of my patrons, Lee. It was nice to meet you. This one is unusual, and one of the reasons I liked it is because it has an inside curve like that. Those are hard to cut for lapidaries because generally you're using something that's got either a flat surface or a kind of a cylindrical surface with a flat edge on it. So you have to use the edge of the wheel usually. Quite get that in the right spot, so I'm going to try and move that a little bit. Like I said, I've not used Natrolite before, and John said it's relatively hard when he's cutting it, but I didn't want to put too much pressure on this top corner up here, so I was kind of manually trying to get that position in the right spot, and I think we're pretty close now. I just didn't want to like bend it around it in case it's, you know, brittle enough to snap off that point or something. I would be really bummed out if I broke this stone. Knock on wood, Chad, right? Well, it was a hot show though. I don't think it got quite as hot as it was supposed to. I think today it got pretty. Yesterday was hot enough to I'm going to put just a little thicker sheet on the back than I usually do. I'm going to use 22 gauge. Probably use 22 gauge for the front and back pieces of the sandwich bale. So, sandwich bale being a term that I think I coined. I don't think that's an actual thing. I think it's a Chad thing. I don't know. Maybe when I thought of that, I just was hungry. Normally I'd square that up or make it into a rectangle, but I think if you haven't been to my channel before, I use primarily hard silver sheet solder. I use a liquid flux that I dribble on with a dropper bottle. The torch I use is a Silversmith model. It's their acetylene air torch. Hotter than a propane or a butane torch, but not as hot as an oxyacetylene torch. So I use a #1 tip on it too. I really like it. It's a good torch. They're not a sponsor, but I would take a sponsorship from Smith because I like their product. So don't be that way. I'm going to cool it. I see it slipped a little bit. It's not perfectly lined up, so I'm going to cool it off and reposition it and flux it. See, I probably should have made it into a rectangle or something. If you're new to this, with silver you generally want to heat the entire piece, because if you leave one part cold, it acts as a kind of a radiator and bleeds heat off and makes it hard to get things to the right temperature. So moving the heat around over the entire piece is kind of an imperative. Okay, here's another little tip to save you doing this. Almost everybody does this at least once. And it is, I have a stone that is not a symmetrical stone. Make the bezel like this, get it all shaped right, and then they go to solder it down to the sheet. They've already pulled the stone out and they accidentally solder it down like that. So the back is on this side then, and they try and fit it. It's like, nope, that's not going to work. And since it's not symmetrical, you can't fudge. You know, so you want to make sure you keep in mind which side is the bottom. Okay, and you can maybe make a mark on it or something. I'll put. Okay, I think that shape is reasonably good. Let's go ahead and cut some 22 gauge sheet and make a bottom for it. The reason I'm using 22 is because we're going to be attaching some little pieces of 14 gauge wire sticking straight up from that. And I want them to have something less flimsy than just the fine silver bezel on the side to be connected to. And if you have really thin sheet on the back, it's not going to give it much structural, stability. And so I think if we have a little bit thicker sheet, more of that will be attached to the wires coming out of the top. I'm a little froggy today in my voice from talking to people so much over the weekend. I normally just sit in my cave and talk to myself while the camera's running. Story of my life. Okay, I'm going to give this just a quick little file to make sure everything's all in the same plane. So the bigger bezel you get, the harder it is to solder it to the base, because there's a lot more mass in the base the bigger it gets, and there's still not much mass in the bezel, so even when it's pretty long. And so it takes quite a bit longer to get enough heat into the base for it to reach the soldering temperature, which in the case of hard silver sheet solder is about 1450 degrees Fahrenheit. And the little mass in the bezel reaches that temperature, especially because you're focusing the heat from above with a flame. That reaches it very quickly. The sheet on the bottom doesn't. So if you're melting bezels a lot, it's because you're getting that bezel to reach temperature before the sheet even gets close. So there's a couple of ways to deal with that. You can use one of those elevated tripod things to get underneath it. One of my followers who sends me nice things occasionally, she uses these little crucibles and creates a little between two of them, a little crack and drapes it across that so she can get the heat underneath it. I sometimes, once everything's kind of fluxed in place, I will use my pick to kind of tip it up and heat from underneath on the side here until the solder starts to flow on top, and then I'll switch it over and start heating the whole thing from up here. I'm not sure if we'll need to do that or not. Something this size, it's not huge, but it's not tiny either, so we'll see. We'll play it by ear. I used to do a lot of shows every year when I was a bit younger, but it's pretty hard on my body anymore to do stuff like that. There's a lot of packing stuff in and, you know, setting up tents and stuff like that is rough on my back. I can't just fling things up like I did when I was younger. Okay, so I can also make sure I heat the outside sheet but jump into the middle once in a while because there's some surface area in there. That's another method. And I'm kind of like not really focusing on the bezel at all. I'm kind of focusing, you know, everywhere on the sheet around it. The bezel will get hot just because it's in proximity. You just don't want to spend a lot of time focused on it. And you want to make sure that sheet gets hot enough on the bottom. Once it flows, then I usually make sure to go all the way around a couple times. We want to make sure we have a sink all the way around. We don't want any unsightly gaps. Nobody wants that. People would talk. If you have to, if you have a steep enough inner curve like this, you might need to use a saw to cut that part out. I think I can get close enough and just file it off then, since mine's got just kind of a shallow dip. Now I need 3 little wires sticking up, so I think I'm gonna just solder some 14 gauge wire onto this, some pieces that are slightly longer than I need them to be, and then once we make this piece that goes up here, we can just cut them off to the right length. So I need just a slight curve or angle to make them kind of point in the right direction. This one needs to be slightly steeper. You could clamp this in your miter vise jig if you need to just so you have something bigger to hold on to, if you have one of those. That's a little better. I want these to be kind of like sticking up parallel. This one might not need much. That's about the flattest part. Probably just leave it. Let's try that and see how that looks. We can always move them a little if we need to. So I could lay some little pieces of solder in there. I do something called pick soldering a lot, where I pick up some of the end of my titanium soldering pick, heat the piece up to temperature, and then touch it where I want it to go. If you're interested in learning about that, there's a pretty good video there about it. I find it to be one of those techniques that freed me from a lot of limitations that I experienced prior to figuring out how to do that. So you want to make sure to get both these pieces up to temperature. The little one's going to reach temperature pretty easily. Make sure the bezel itself is pretty hot. That's pretty good, I think. Good enough for what we're trying to do. So let's shape this little piece here. I'm going to use some 10 gauge square. So it looks like we need a piece about, yay long. It's about an inch or 2.54 centimeters ish. I think what I want to do is use my chasing hammer and just kind of pound it flatter on this side so it spreads out, and then we can file it a little bit so it narrows even more than that. Or we could even do turn it this way and hammer it flat on that side. We could try that. They call that anti-clastic is the word I was looking for. So. Well, now I'm going to do a little creative filing. We'll try to get this to shape I want it to be. That looks pretty good. So I think let's do this. Make these black here, the little projecting pieces. Get this lined up how we want it to, and then we'll use a pin to scratch in where we need to cut them off. That looks pretty good. Actually got them in place where they soldered pretty nicely. So I think I'm just going to solder them on there. Then we'll put this loop on here, and then I'll probably go off camera and make that bail. Okay, looks like we got good solder joints there. Okay, so let's extend a little bit more of that 14 gauge right from the center, and I'll solder a ring onto it. I'll put a ring on it. Alright, so I took that 16 gauge round. It's either 16 or 14, I'm not sure which. But I put the crack in the ring to the side so that I can open it up and slide the bail on once I'm done with that. So I'm going to solder that on, pickle it, and then make that little bail off camera, and then we'll come back and put it together. Okay, I'll be back in a few with the bail. Okay, I have a little bail made. Let's see why I call it a sandwich bail. It's got two slices on either side with some stuff in the middle. And you can make them all different shapes. It just depends on what you're trying to kind of create. I think I'm gonna make these a little less lethal. And I've got that on there, so I'm just gonna slide that through there. Yeah, I'll close it up. Let's use a little medium paste on this one just to make sure we don't screw anything up. You know, chances are good I wouldn't have a problem just using hard solder on this one, because I can just avoid heating this thing, and the transfer heat from this to this is not going to be enough to get that up to the soldering temperature, so nothing will probably flow. However, just to be safe, let's do it this way. So we'll put that in the pickle for a while. I'm going to go fix my wife some dinner, and then we'll polish it up. So I went ahead and set that garnet in there, and I think that looks pretty good. One thing I'm going to do now is go ahead and set this stone, and something I do when I have sharp corners like this is I thin out the top of the bezel just at the very tip up here, so it's a little bit not quite 0.41 millimeters, because it makes it easier to force it over a tight spot like that. And I also do this differently than others in that I use my chain nose pliers as a bezel pusher and a burnisher. So I'm going to start by doing that. last step is going to be burnishing, and I'm going to do it with this rounded outer edge, and that's just kind of really with a lot of force, making sure that top edge is laid down. Alright, well, I'll get that cleaned up a little bit better and get some better pictures. Put them at the end. Okay, well, that was the slanted Natrolite and Garnet pendant. I hope you enjoyed that. If you did, make sure to hit the like button before you go. And I'd love it if you'd take a moment and go to my main YouTube channel page. I have been doing this about 3.5 years now at 3 videos per week, so I've accumulated a large quantity of videos, 500 or so. And so I think it might be a good idea for you to go check it out and see what else you can find over there. I have a lot of interesting content, I think, and almost certainly something else useful or interesting to you. So check them out. Make sure to subscribe to my channel, and don't forget to hit the video description down below. There's some important links there. I'll put a link to John's Etsy store in case you want to check out some of his stones. There's also a link to my merch store if you want to get yourself one of those nice design idea sketchbooks. A link to my Patreon if you want to find out more about that nice community. And then there's a link to my ebooks if you want to get yourself one of those. They're guides to each year's video tutorials, and they include a link to each of the videos from the particular year that they're covering, as well as having additional information, pictures, materials lists, difficulty ratings, all those kinds of things about each of the videos and the projects. So it's a nice way to have a whole bunch of projects at your fingertips, and a really nice way to support my channel. So thank you in advance if you choose to do that. Alright, well, thanks for watching today. Take care. Happy silversmithing.